Dwellers. Birds chirping around 9 a.m. feels better on crisp grass. Waking up on these fields when I was young was esoteric in nature, often hung from last night's mischief, always confused as to how I got here. Things were different this time. I haven't had a sip for years and I knew exactly how I got here. For whatever reason, the world's power structures crumbled and felt the need to annihilate one another, for good. I was lucky enough to be offered a place here, far below with sturdy foundations and support necessary for harboring nuclear fugitives. The lucky few that outlived the world's demise, but the structures of the survivors were weak and rotten at the foundation with too much weight. It was sure to buckle. It was a struggle getting out, unarmed and starving, but vigilant and alert. I remembered the way out, but it was impossible to seal the door properly. I walked along a silent river for a while, feeling an itching sensation the whole way up my fuzzy legs. Atop the riverbank, a marshland with scorched, golden brown grass. When the bombs fell, the crisp life that I had grown accustomed to when waking up in these fields when I was young would never feel the same. The river ran through sodden reed fields with the scorched marsh along either side. I scaled the vertical bank that ran parallel at shoulder height before the reeds. They feel weird on my legs. But the marsh only sucked in the soul of the grimy grey and white Reeboks, sealing feet and Mr. Men's socks, gifts from the bunker. I didn't enjoy the notion of marsh napping under the stars. Instead, I thought it best to keep on until the legs hit solid earth. I got there around noon, still hungry, lips getting dry by the minute, so probably thirsty. I had nothing to fix either ailment, so sleeping it off was the safest bet. Ducking into a side bush, I managed to get an hour or two with my eyes closed before the sun opened up the lids at noon of my second day above ground. Looking around, I saw that I can only describe as some grotesque graveyard. Sheep and bovine lay sprawled in rotten, maggot-infested carcasses piled in herds along the cracked pavement the ground had begun to reclaim. Busted and bruised, but sturdy enough for your Mondeo. I took a minute to breathe outside an old farm, thinking I'd have a moment to savor filling my lungs with the fresh country air, but the sensation in my lungs was putrid and rotten. Should have kept walking, but I had to pry. Must have been about 300 skeletons piled up in cages. Skeletons of every kind of farm animal lay dormant, some still with flesh and dangled drabs from the ribs and legs, once white or red, now rotten with a grey tinge in the few strips that remain. Either succumbed to radiation or simply starved to death. I returned to the river to vomit. Most of it was carried away, but mostly it reminded me of how hungry I was. It never occurred to me that someone might need to take food through the middle of nowhere. When I woke on the golden brown, scorched grass this morning, I couldn't tell if I was hungry or angry. Definitely the former. I haven't the time for the latter. I kept on through the carcass-ridden fields of golden brown until I made it to the roadside. A grass bank caught my fall as I tumbled down a dry dirt decline, landing abruptly into the empty traffic lane. I gathered my senses, now scattered but functioning. That's when I saw the Mondeo, and your headlights spooked me into a dive for the hard shoulder. "So, how long were you under there?" the Mondeo driver asked. "Not long. About 3 years," I replied. "Oh, okay. Why did you leave?" they asked again. "It was too much. Started off fine, but it descended as soon as the door closed." I lit a cigarette. Probably should have asked, but the Mondeo will be mine soon anyway. They put the wrong people in charge. A few of them got the idea to force an unfriendly change in management. A few more had the same idea, the same bustling takeover that happened 2 years before. No family left. No ties. I flicked the cigarette butt in the direction of a metal gate on a side road. A dusty dirt road leading to another loathsome farm barn. "How did you get out? Surely they wouldn't just let you leave." I didn't like my driver's tone. Forgotten his name already, and the questions are making me uneasy. I think the radiation levels are too high here. Starting to feel queasy. It wasn't easy leaving. I did what I had to do. Mortality went out the window. Not proud to say. Not ashamed to admit that I wasn't happy they got in my way. Might have said too much. "You mean you?" The driver looked at me with a tense wince. I did what I had to do. Hold the fort. I'd never do it again. A reassuring enough lie, I hope. "If you say so." The driver was still tense, clutching the wheel and probably unaware of the fight-or-flight instinct kicking in. "How did you end up here? Act natural, act friendly." "Similar to yours, except mine held about 10 less than yours. Just my wife, our twin sons and me. Honestly, it was amazing at first. We built the thing to last for this situation. Stashed and stored as many movies as possible and all the video game consoles we could afford. Cost a fortune for the contractors too, but they did a good job, I thought. The driver started to relax. Instead, a few tears were visibly trickling from their sunken eyes, their freshly formed, unkempt beard catching a few of the drops. 3 bedrooms and a bathroom, a lounge, and a small cupboard, and a couple TVs, appliances and supplies that were meant to stay ticking for long enough to outlive the fallout. Slowly, we started to notice things weren't right. What do you mean? Pressing for more, hoping to not get more than I bargained for. We noticed a smell at first, followed by shivering sensations and cold sweats, dry mouths, and hard lumps. I don't have much longer to live. Over the years, we developed numerous bouts of vomiting and irritability. I'm past that stage. Too many of my insides have already started to shut down, and I haven't the energy to do much more than drive or walk or talk. He took a minute to breathe. When I left, I noticed their idea of gamma ray retardant was some black and yellow electrical tape that barely held for the years I was there. Seems like we must have gotten out respectively around the same time. I took a bit of time to enjoy my old bed before I decided to drive. I wasn't sure if he meant something by this. Can't trust anyone in a wasteland. And the wholesome family man routine made me nervous. You mentioned a family. Where are they now? I asked. Something about the driver's story sparked some pity in me. Pity directed towards the man on death's door. Unfortunately, paranoia seems to overpower pity. They didn't make it. I didn't understand why medication wasn't working. Painkillers can only do so much to combat residual rays that malform the cells. But it was all we could think of to make life a shred easier. And like you said, I did what I had to do. Eventually. I wanted to ask more, but I could hardly find a response to something that I responded to with such an uneasy feeling. Instead, I nodded in the driver's direction. A mutual understanding. No gun required. I used to miss the green leaves turning brown in the autumn months. The surrounding woods were raised above us atop another vertical bank, this time on solid earth. We left the marshes around an hour ago, driving into the nearest town by the beach. A small fishing town that looks like it could have been an interesting place to live before the bombs fell. Enough space to move around, but too much rubble to be inhabitable any longer. Apparently, the driver was certain this was the quickest way to the north. The tip-off to venture to Liverpool came from the intermittent broadcasts that found their way onto the radio. Not distress beacons, more a call to safety. In truth, we couldn't make out every word of the transmission, but the idea that this city was relatively radiation-free was enough to give 2 vagrants something to do. We hadn't spoken for a few hours now. The silence hung thick, like the pungent smell that took this man's family, I thought. Far away from the countryside now, our travels had led us to Milton Keynes, now the remnants of an outer city of the capital, one I had often stopped in on travels, before the bombs dropped, for fast food and a stretch. Usually, a Big Mac and the walk to the WC would suffice. Still patiently waiting the right time, not sure how much longer it would be until we had to refuel. The dash says half empty. Plenty of time to make sure I don't brutally commandeer a sinking ship. As I moved my gaze from the lights above the steering wheel, they were drawn back in the same direction, but lower, meeting the familiar footwear that had been connected to my legs this entire journey. White Reeboks and Mr. Men's socks. Mine had Mr. Forgetful sewed on. His, Mr. Bump. Fitting. The driver's attire was far more vibrant than my own, with less mud stains, but they were identical. And it gave me the impression that my new friend might not be who they claim. Do I know them? Driving along an empty motorway now. There would be no room for error should I have to back down. The Mondeo would chase me down. Can't jump off a bridge to solid ground and expect to keep running. Before I took my chance, I had to press about the footwear, for peace of mind. Cool shoes, I told the driver, who glanced over. Thanks. Looks like we have a similar taste, Nick. What did you call me? Nick. I know who you are. I was starting to sweat. How? From where? We lived in the same bunker. We lived in adjacent pods down there. We had the same TV, probably a similar room layout, and the paintings from the same boot sale. A neighbor down below. The driver had spun a tale to test my faculties, paranoid of losing their way of life to outsiders, doomed and desperate in the waste. If any existed, it was surreal to meet another from 20 feet underground. So you're a liar, I responded eventually. Maybe you're a liar too. He paused and I froze. We all knew what we were getting into. We all knew the door wasn't secure for a reason. We were low enough to not need any reinforcement. You must have known you could leave, but you're too much of a risk to let go. If you hadn't blurted out everything about us, I wouldn't have to do this. He reached to his left hip with his right hand. What do you... The dweller's words were silenced by the echoing barrel, hurtling a small caliber bullet between their eyes. Pulling up at the side of the motorway, an empty dual carriageway, forgotten by time, growing vegetation with deer and rabbits chewing on mushrooms and parked cars. It appears as if the nuclear winter had fallen, nature itching to reclaim the wasteland before being tarnished further by asphalt and tar. The Mondeo pulled away as the dweller's remains fell into the lake below,